20 leading scientists, 3 grueling weeks, and a groundbreaking fusion energy project on the brink of collapse. Just when Lumina Labs was about to admit defeat, a black woman with a cleaning cloth in hand and her young son, waiting at home, happened to step into the empty control room. She quietly glanced at the complex schematics on the holographic display and in a single instant changed the future of sustainable power with one observation. She thought no one had witnessed it, but Arthur Thorne, the notoriously cold, powerful CEO of Lumina Labs, saw everything. What he did next would alter their lives forever. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful content like this. Arthur Thorne, the most influential figure in global energy, CEO of Lumina Labs, stood silently in the corner, his icy eyes fixed on the chaos worth billions flickering on the digital display. The pressure from Project Solara, hailed as the company's biggest breakthrough in a decade, had become a ticking time bomb, threatening to destroy Lumina Labs' reputation and standing at any moment. For months, millions had been poured into emergency workshops. Top scientists flew in at exorbitant fees, yet no one could untangle the critical technical glitch. Arthur stepped into the center of the room. Each footstep echoed sharply on the polished floor, drawing a sudden hush over the experts. Beads of sweat darkened their expensive collars, and nervous, sidelong glances betrayed their failure. In a low voice, as cold as a blade, Arthur spoke, "I've paid you millions of dollars, and this is the best you can do." A garbled mess on a screen. No one dared answer. The room felt frozen. Benjamin Croft, the head of engineering, once brimming with arrogant confidence, now kept his gaze fixed on the trembling hand resting on his tablet. Arthur Thorne's stare swept the room, each look an invisible bullet piercing their bruised pride. "We've got exactly 3 days to save this contract. Fail, and Lumina Labs loses billions of dollars, let alone our reputation. And believe me, if that happens, none of you will land a custodial job, much less an energy engineering role anywhere." With a slam, the control room door shut behind the CEO, leaving a stifling atmosphere of despair and panic. The experts exchanged looks of utter helplessness. Hope had vanished. Outside the clear glass walls, no one noticed the small, unassuming figure in a faded janitor's uniform, Lena Hayes, cleaning cloth in hand, walking quietly down the gleaming corridor, her expression pensive. She had no idea that destiny was about to make her the savior of Lumina Labs, for in that fleeting moment as she passed, Lena's gaze had flicked to the jumbled figures on the digital board, and she spotted something amiss, a critical error every expert had overlooked. But at that moment, Lena simply shook her head, thinking someone like her had no business intervening. She had no inkling that soon the tiny detail she'd glimpsed would spark the chain of events that would change her life and perhaps the fate of Lumina Labs forever. Lena walked away from the gleaming hallway outside the control room, unsettled by the glimpse she'd just caught. But Lena Hayes was all too accustomed to burying her sharp insights beneath her worn janitor's uniform and everyday cleaning cloth. To her, Lumina Labs was just a job, a way to make ends meet. Nothing like the place to showcase the intellect and ambition she'd set aside after a devastating loss. At 34, Lena was a single mother to 7-year-old Leo, whose bright, sparkling eyes always looked at her with pure admiration. Every night, she left her son with a trusted neighbor before clocking in for the overnight cleaning shift at Lumina Labs headquarters, a building she once thought she belonged in, but that now felt utterly foreign. Few people knew that this small woman, with her softly curling hair and deep, thoughtful eyes, had been one of Caltech's top theoretical physics students, a future so dazzling anyone would envy it. But fate had never been kind to Lena. A year before graduation, a sudden accident took away the man she loved most, leaving her shattered and solely responsible for baby Leo in her arms. Tonight, as she cleaned the tiny office kitchen, Lena's gaze drifted through the window to the city lights below. She thought of her late husband, Thomas Hayes, who had always encouraged her to pursue her physics passion, who would say, "Lynn, the world needs people like you, people who see what everyone else overlooks." Those memories of Thomas were both comforting and painful, reminders of the life Lena was forced to abandon. She felt she no longer had time or the right to dream. Now she lived every moment for Leo, working, sacrificing everything so her son would never want or feel abandoned. That was why she endured every sneer and icy glance from Lumina Labs' successful professionals. Of all those disdainful looks, none was sharper than Benjamin Crofts, the energy team lead in his expensive suit and designer watch, with the arrogance of someone who'd never known failure. Benjamin was MIT trained, born into wealth, convinced only people like him deserved to be at Lumina Labs. To him, a black woman in a janitor's uniform like Lena was invisible, just a speck of dust in a shiny building there, only to clean up the messes he made. He never bothered to hide his contempt. More than once, when he bumped into her in the hallway, he didn't even look her way, merely snapping, "Watch it. Don't let your dirty water splash on my shoes." Lena always stayed silent. She knew that in Benjamin's mind, a person's worth was tied to degrees, money, and power, the very thing she'd lost when she walked away from Caltech. Benjamin embodied every prejudice and pressure Lena faced daily. But rather than fight back, she quietly held on to a fierce belief. True intellect can't be measured by money or designer suits, but by deep understanding and the ability to see what others miss. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Lena pushed her cleaning cart down the long corridor once more, passing the control room, where the faint glow still lit the display, the complex equation standing as a silent challenge. She paused, taking a deep breath. Her dark brown eyes flickered with intense hesitation. A voice inside urged her. She had to go in, prove she was still Lena Hayes, the woman who'd made Caltech proud, and that she could solve the problem threatening Lumina Labs' future. But logic quickly pulled her back to reality. Shaking her head, she told herself, "No, Lena, you're not that woman anymore. That isn't your battle." She gripped her cleaning cloth handle and continued on, leaving behind the control room and the multi-billion-dollar problem still unsolved. What she didn't know was that in just a few hours, her lingering doubt would drive her back into that room, this time not to clean the floor, but to rewrite her destiny and that of Lumina Labs. Lena's footsteps echoed steadily down the long, cavernous hallway. But this time, as she passed the familiar control room, she froze as though pulled by an invisible force. Her heart thudded unnaturally fast. Her eyes slipped again to the large glass pane, and there it was, the holographic display, its complex equations challenging both her intellect and her courage. Lena stood still for a few seconds, fighting the fierce urge welling up inside her, but this pull was stronger than any hesitation or prejudice she'd ever endured. Finally, as if hypnotized, she set down her cleaning cart and slowly stepped into the room. Silence enveloped the space so completely that Lena could hear her own heartbeat. On the display, a tangle of mathematical symbols and convoluted equations sprawled in chaotic disarray, mirroring Lumina Labs' current despair. Lena approached the screen, her focus razor-sharp, her hands clenching instinctively, a habit from her Caltech days whenever she confronted a thorny problem. She studied each character, each formula, then her eyes widened in astonishment. In the bottom right corner, she spotted a tiny but critical error, one the elite team, paid millions, had somehow overlooked. Her pulse raced as she realized they had treated a parameter as constant when it should have followed a variable reactive function, a mistake that could wreak havoc on the entire project. Unbelievable, Lena whispered in the hush, a mix of amazement and exasperation at the senior expert's oversight. For a fleeting moment, she was torn between two impulses, the fear of stepping beyond her janitor's role and the burning desire to correct the error that was costing the company billions. Resolve won out. She grabbed a digital stylus from the tray, inhaled deeply, and set to work. Boldly, Lena erased the flawed notation and replaced it with the proper formulation, a clear, logical, adaptive algorithm. Her hands, accustomed to wielding a cleaning cloth each night, now moved with the practiced confidence of the day she once stood before lecture halls at Caltech. Within minutes, the display transformed into a model of clarity and precision. Lena stepped back, a gentle smile playing on her lips as a weight lifted from her shoulders. She told herself this might be the last time she intervened in such a technical crisis. Unbeknownst to her, CEO Arthur Thorne had been watching from the shadowed end of the corridor. His cold, ice-blue gaze missed nothing as he quietly observed the janitor silently rewriting a multi-billion-dollar equation. Arthur was not a man who trusted easily, especially in a situation this strange. To him, every action had a motive, but what he had just witnessed defied all logic and calculation. He stared at Lena, questions flooding his mind. How did an ordinary cleaner spot and fix such a critical flaw? Who was she, and why had she hidden her talent beneath such a humble, enduring facade? Those questions unsettled Arthur, even as they sparked his curiosity. Standing in the darkness, the powerful CEO of Lumina Labs narrowed his eyes, his suspicion shifting to cold, calculated interest. He understood that this mysterious woman could become a pivotal asset in Lumina Labs' ruthless game of power, or the greatest threat he had ever faced. Meanwhile, Lena, stylus in hand, quietly slipped out of the control room. She had no idea that her small, seemingly accidental act would unleash a storm at Lumina Labs, one that would not only save the multi-billion-dollar project, but shake to its core the company's deepest prejudices and ambitions. The moment Lena's figure vanished around the dark corridor bend, Arthur Thorne stepped into the eerily silent control room. The faint glow from the large display cast harsh shadows across his steely features. In his thoughtful eyes, he could still see the equations she'd rewritten. Streaks of bright red like fresh blood across the holographic screen. He moved closer, his brow furrowing as he scrutinized every tiny detail the mysterious woman had left behind. Without wasting a second, Arthur pulled out the tablet he always carried. His normally steady, precise hands trembled ever so slightly as he entered the display data into the fusion simulation. He pressed execute and watched the screen, tense as if awaiting a verdict on his own fate. The tablet lit up. Numbers danced across the screen, instantly processing Lena's new algorithm. Within seconds, a message flashed. Performance up 62.1%. Efficiency reduced to a record low. Arthur stood frozen for a heartbeat. Nearly 60%, a figure beyond anything Lumina Labs experts, whom they'd paid millions to hire, had ever achieved. He glanced back at the display, his gaze sharpening as he tried to fathom the person behind such an astonishing discovery. To a man like Arthur, who prided himself on controlling every variable, the sudden appearance of an unforeseen factor like Lena was both an opportunity and a potential threat. Arthur was never the type of CEO to merely crunch numbers. He'd been a brilliant engineer before ascending to lead Lumina, and he was both respected and feared for his ability to analyze people as quickly as he dissected complex algorithms. He didn't trust easily, especially when the talent in question appeared as enigmatically as Lena Hayes. Standing before the board, Arthur replayed the moment Lena had silently solved what a team of senior engineers could not. From his vantage point in the hallway, he detected both hesitation and fierce resolve in her every movement. He couldn't help but wonder, why would someone with such rare intellect choose to work as a janitor, cleaning offices in the dead of night? Was it humility? Or was she hiding something deeper? Suddenly, the control room door swung open, jolting Arthur from his thoughts. Benjamin Croft stood in the doorway, clutching a fresh cup of coffee, his face registering surprise and a flicker of concern at seeing Arthur alone in the room. "Arthur," Benjamin ventured, "everything okay?" Arthur turned slowly, his expression reverting to its customary chill. He regarded Benjamin, the self-assured engineer who prided himself on being the best Lumina Labs had to offer. A man who'd never been truly challenged before, yet now in Arthur's eyes, Benjamin looked patently ordinary, even vulnerable. Arthur didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked with calm authority, his words like a sharpened blade, "Benjamin, are you absolutely certain your team vetted this entire algorithm?" Benjamin chuckled arrogantly. "Arthur, we're the top engineers at Lumina Labs. I guarantee no one here could have done better." Arthur's lips curved into a cold, knowing smile. "Then explain why a janitor could spot a critical flaw your entire team missed." Benjamin's grin died, his confidence melting into doubt, then into outright anger. "A janitor? What are you talking about?" Arthur stepped closer and pointed at the red markings on the display. His voice was firm, commanding. "A cleaning woman stood right here and corrected this algorithm. Benjamin, I ran the test and performance jumped nearly 60%, an outcome far beyond anything your experts achieved over the last 6 months." Benjamin's face flushed with humiliation and fury, but what terrified him more than his own embarrassment was Arthur's gaze, icy, penetrating, as if seeing every crack in his pride and every hidden insecurity. Arthur passed Benjamin, leaning in to murmur his warning before exiting. "Prepare your explanation. Tomorrow, I expect your entire team here to account for how they overlooked a simple mistake worth billions of dollars." Benjamin stood frozen in the dim room, the coffee cup growing cold in his hand. Rage and humiliation burned in his eyes as he stared at the red scrawl on the display, the symbols that had awakened a real threat to his position. To Benjamin, a janitor daring to challenge him was the bitterest insult imaginable. He clenched his fist, vowing that the woman responsible would pay dearly for her intrusion. But Benjamin had no idea that his fury and blinding arrogance would thrust him into the fiercest power struggle he'd ever faced, one he was utterly unprepared for. The next morning, Lumina Lab's large conference room was packed with quantum physicists, senior engineers, and executives, each face a mixture of shock and curiosity. By dawn, rumors of the mysterious janitor's appearance had spread like wildfire through every department, ratcheting up the tension to a fever pitch. The door swung open, and CEO Arthur Thorne entered first, his expression icy as his gaze swept the room. Right behind him came Lena Hayes, the woman usually hidden in the night shift with her cleaning cloth, stepping into the room as if she had wandered into an alien world. Lena felt dozens of eyes scrutinizing her, but forced herself to remain composed, hands clenched into fists at her sides to mask her nerves. Arthur motioned for Lena to take the seat beside him, an honor reserved solely for senior experts. A few engineers exchanged bewildered glances, but no one dared object. Benjamin Croft, seated directly across from her, displayed the most contemptuous glare. His lips pressed thin in anger, as if her very presence insulted his honor. Wasting no time, Arthur cut to the chase in a voice that was cool, yet provocative. Today, I've invited Lena Hayes, the person who discovered and fixed a critical error in our algorithm, an error Benjamin Croft's team failed to spot despite months of work. The room erupted in whispers. Some looked at Lena skeptically, others with curiosity, but most turned to Benjamin, waiting for his response. Benjamin clenched his fists, then let out a mocking laugh that shattered the tense atmosphere. "Arthur," he sneered, "don't you think this is a bit absurd? A janitor, someone with no credentials or experience, invited to a meeting of top experts just because of some fluke." He stared directly at Lena, his look dripping with contempt and challenge. "Lena, right? I'm really curious. Where did you learn quantum physics? Maybe from free online tutorials or from eavesdropping on engineers while you cleaned at night?" A few attendees snickered. Others shook their heads at Benjamin's rudeness. Lena remained silent for a moment, steady in her racing heart. Arthur watched in silence. He knew Lena needed to overcome this test to prove herself. Finally, Lena lifted her head, her gaze strikingly calm as she met Benjamin's eyes. "I was a student at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, majoring in theoretical physics. But I suppose you don't care about that, do you, Mr. Croft? The only thing on your mind is why someone like me could spot an error that you and your so-called experts overlooked." Her voice was soft, yet razor-sharp, silencing the room instantly. Benjamin hadn't expected such a confident rebuttal. His face flushed as he shot back angrily, "I don't care where you studied. What matters is why we should trust a solution from someone with zero qualifications or real-world experience. A single mistake in this algorithm could cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. This isn't housekeeping." Lena nodded gently, her tone steady and resolute. "Exactly, Mr. Croft. This isn't a game, and because it matters so much, I chose to intervene. The flaw in the algorithm wasn't complex. I'm sure any clear-headed person could have caught it, but your experts didn't. Maybe the problem isn't skill, but the arrogance of those who believe they can never be wrong. Benjamin sprang to his feet, rage contorting his features, about to speak again, only to be cut off by Arthur's crisp command. "That's enough, Benjamin. This meeting is to assess real results, not for you to nurse your bruised ego." Arthur turned to Lena with an encouraging nod. "Lena, please walk the team through your solution. We want to hear it directly from the person who uncovered the error." Lena rose and approached a holographic display once more. The familiar rush of lecturing at Caltech flooded back. She took a deep breath, eyes sweeping the room before resting on Benjamin Croft, and spoke clearly and confidently. "Ladies and gentlemen, the issue in the algorithm was the use of a constant model where a variable reactive function was required. That mistake inflated the error margin and destabilized the fusion system. By swapping the constant model for an adaptive algorithm, performance improves by nearly 60%. That's exactly what I did." Silence reigned as everyone stared at Lena, skepticism giving way to admiration and astonishment. Benjamin gripped the edge of the table, realizing how cornered he was, his anger and resentment toward Lena surging. For Benjamin, this was more than a battle to defend his pride. It was the start of a scheme he intended to launch to eliminate the threat named Lena Hayes from Lumina Labs once and for all. But he had no idea that this reckless vow would plunge him into a power struggle far beyond his control.